officially recording. Cyan, thank you so much for your introduction. Thank you so much to Chevalier's Books, the oldest bookstore in Los Angeles, the most beautiful bookstore in Los Angeles. And thank you so much to all of you for joining us tonight. I am so excited to share with you a bit about my new book, Pretend Plumber, but I'm also really excited to share with you more about this wonderful new book by Ruthie Marlenée, my friend. And before we get into it, we're going to do some reading and some talking. I just wanted to give a big shout out to the amazing hostess with the mostest, Liz Gonzalez, founder and leader of the Women's Write-In, which is how Ruthie and I met each other. And I think that the Women's Write-In started during COVID. Is that right, Ruthie?
Yeah, I went back to look just to make sure because COVID makes you forget things. But I think it was March of 2020. Those were my first emails and instructions from Liz. Hi, Liz, if she's there. Thank you. So yeah.
Great. And then we didn't meet each other in person for a long time. And our first meetup was just this April, wasn't it?
The LA Book Festival.
At the LA Festival of Books. It was so great to hang out with you and go and listen to Amy Bender, which we'll be talking about maybe a little bit later. That was just so awesome. So I think what we're going to do now, everybody, is we're just going to share a little bit from the beginning or near the beginning of our books, just so you can get a sense for what they're about. And so, Ruthie, why don't you take it away?
Okay, so hi everybody. Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you, Cyan. Thank you, Chevalier Books. Thank you, Liz. Thank you, Los Angeles. Thank you, everybody. So a little bit about what my book is about. I don't know if I should go into the synopsis or it's, yeah, let's see. This is where I go down the, so a little bit about it, where it starts. It starts, Maya has got to go down to Mexico. She's an LA attorney. She's got to go down to Mexico to identify the body of her father. And she has sworn to herself that she'd never go back. So this is a story about mothers and daughters and immigration and being Mexican, being American, assimilating. And so I'll just read a little bit about this of the synopsis here. I'm sorry, my pages are all scrambled. COVID brain. Sometimes la sangre atrae, the blood calls you back. And when Maya gets the call to go back to her agave roots to claim the body of her long missing father, her world changes forever. So it's set against the backdrop of her childhood in Mexico. Agave Blues is a story of an ailing attorney, Maya, in a broken relationship and butting heads with her teenage daughter, Lily. Maya had sworn never to return, but once she sets foot on the mystical grounds, she uncovers her family's turbulent history and how tequila infuses deep secrets that have altered her life, both emotionally and physically. And once she gets there, she realizes what's been missing in her life: magic, mystery, art, and unconditional love. And the stories of her past, including a myth. This is going to be a magic realism story, a myth that her grandfather is Pancho Villa. So she'll enter the fields which will seem to heal her and her relationships. And there will be a childhood crush that will resurface. We have to have that in there, right? But that's only going to cause her more grief as she tries to master the art of tequila. So we'll go into the reading, I guess. So I am going to read from chapter 4 of my book. I think I just, I'm going to find it here. I gave you a little bit about the beginning. So chapter 4 is called Tengo un cuento. I have a story. 2 days ago is as good a place as any to start my tale. The morning before the blood called me back, prior to the final breakup with my fiance, the temperature in October had already soared to 102 degrees. I'd rushed along the 101 freeway just to get to court on time, and by the time I'd arrived, dressed in a purple Ann Taylor suit, I felt like a wilted eggplant. I dashed through the stuffy, dimly lit halls, but before pushing through the door of a Department 12, I rushed into the ladies' room, straight to the toilet. Pepita, now Pepita is her stomach. Pepita had been acting up now for a couple of days. At the sink, I splashed my face, noticing the dark, puffy circles cradling my eyes like little purple aprons. I patted back my hair, tucking a stray back into my bun, and then I touched up my rum raisin lipstick. Before pushing through the doors into the department, I smoothed my skirt and walked up the aisle to check in with the clerk, a plump, middle-aged woman who looked like she'd rather be playing church bingo than marking off the court calendar. "Good morning, Miss Miller," the clerk said without looking up. "You smell good, Coco Chanel." "Yes, thank you. I hope it's not too." "Take a seat," the bored woman said. The courtroom clearly was her jurisdiction. I scanned the room for Mr. Montoya, my client, whom I represented in an unlawful death lawsuit against Allstate Insurance. So far, there were only a couple of people seated in the gallery. One, a young woman wearing a bright pink scrunchie in her ratty-looking hair, sat on the carved-up bench checking her phone. She wore large hooped silver earrings and a tight fluorescent lime green tank top with her black bra straps hanging out like they were trying to escape the 90s. I thought about Lily, grateful she finally had walked the right path. Another middle-aged businessman who looked like he had better things to do than to sit there and wait for clients or his attorney, checked the clock on a side wall as he adjusted his tie. And another, a spacey, tatted out dude, stared dead straight ahead. But Mr. Victor Montoya wasn't amongst them. I took my seat for what was to be the final day of a pretrial and set down my leather briefcase, a gift from my fiance, probably paid for with my own money. I placed my French manicured nails on my lap, splaying my left fingers as I gazed at the modest 1-carat diamond engagement ring. Probably paid for by, oh, stop. But I couldn't stop thinking about Zane. I hadn't heard from him for a couple of days. At least thinking about him took the focus off Lily. And even though I'd lost sleep agonizing over Zane's whereabouts, at this moment, nothing mattered except to do my best representing my client. I reached into my purse and like my own obsessive teenage daughter, I checked my phone again for the 100th time. Nothing. The waiting and wondering were slowly killing me. And then seated to my left, I noticed a short, disheveled male with just a shroud of color-treated hair. To see attorney Richard Hughes in court on time certainly surprised me. All week long, he'd been making his snide comments, whether to rattle me or just because he was a slimy iguana. He leaned over and I could smell the combination of stale coffee and misogyny on his breath. "You know, you don't even look Mexican," he said. Holding my breath, I looked askance at him, ready to claw out his beady eyes. "And with your light complexion," he added, "you could pass for Italian." I closed my eyes, shaking my head. I'd heard such remarks before, and now that he'd said it, I was pissed off even more, as if Italians were really all that and a piece of pizza pie, or as if Mexicans weren't. But I kept silent. I'd climbed this far and wasn't ready to die on the mountain arguing with such a moron. Inhaling deeply, I turned to him, smiling. "I'm pretty sure you can't even pass for human." He laughed. "Your English is flawless." Like you would know. But it was true. I'd practiced very hard to soften my R's, to get rid of any trace of an accent, any trace of my past. And it was because of people like him. This cute, shy little Mexican girl, the object of boys' desires, could only be safe if she got rid of her Mexicanness. Once we got to the States, Mama insisted I assimilate. I rarely spoke Spanish again, especially not in school where it was banned, and not even at home where Mama forbade it. Sadly, Lily had to learn the language in high school from a teacher with roots in Milwaukee. There was no reason for it, no reason to stay connected to the shattered past. I'd erected a wall so high, but still the memories seeped through the cracks and fissures of my mind. A kiss of cool air gushed in as the courtroom doors whooshed open. A faded old white hat came sailing up the aisle, preceding its owner, my client, an aged, lanky Mexican man with closely cropped white hair. Mr. Montoya had run a family business, landscape business in Calabasas, and it was his son who'd tragically been electrocuted on the job. The old man bent down to retrieve his hat, and for the first time, never mind that I'd been working with him for months now, there suddenly seemed to be something familiar about the humble Victor Montoya, almost as if he were a relative. Those green eyes and thick dark brows. How had I not seen it before? Simple. With all that had been going on in my life lately, I hadn't noticed the forest through the trees. What part of Mexico did he say he was from? Jalisco, but what part? It sat on the tip of my memory, but then I felt a vibration in my pocket and only one thing occupied my mind. Without hesitation, I pulled out my cell to see a text and without a moment to spare, but it was the same. From a side door in the back, Judge Owens entered a room and took his seat. I loosened my collar and blew some hair down onto my damp chest. A dapper man in his early 60s, he had a healthy tan and a head full of wavy hair like vanilla frosting. I suspected L'Oreal 9A because he thought he was worth it. Only he wasn't as sweet, and I'd been warned not to piss him off. As the judge took a seat, I quickly took a moment to return the text. And then the next text came in, I laughed out loud before noticing Richard approach the bench. Both he and the judge gaped at me. Judge Owens pointed a spindly, chastising finger, summoning me forward, but still grinning. I didn't need an invitation. I had this in the bag. As I made my way up to the bench, practically skipping, I whispered to myself, "Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year." "What's that, Miss Miller?" the judge asked. "Oh, nothing, Your Honor." The judge put on his glasses, snapped open the case file, and cleared his throat. "Mr. Hughes informs me you've reached a settlement." I held up my phone as if it were the missing Exhibit A and turned to Richard. 1 million, and we'll call it a day. "Dollars?" Richard asked, chuckling nervously. "Well, I don't mean pesos." And I'll stop there.
Thanks, Ruthie. That's such a great, it's not the very beginning, but it's very close to the beginning. And it's such a great chapter. You get so much done. We get in just in terms of craft, it's so beautifully constructed. And I saw in the chat, Juanita said, "I know those clerks." The description of the courtroom is just so fabulous. And I just love all the internal dialogue going on. It's just great. Okay, so now for something completely different.
Now it's your turn.
I'll just say a little bit of where we are in the chapter I'm going to read, which is chapter 3. So at the beginning of this novel, Sarracine Enfant, our hero is a wealthy, neurodivergent, queer curious, Jewish, almost 14-year-old Los Angelina, whose fancy Hancock Park house has serious plumbing issues. Since her parents aren't home, Sarracine takes matters into her own hands and she telephones the family handyman, who happens to be Israeli. Mr. Pasternak is his name, and he arrives at the house where she is hanging out with her best friend Charlus, and that's all you need to know. So here we go. Mr. Pasternak comes in with 2 guys who speak only Russian and 2 guys who speak something else, but it isn't Ukrainian because Tommy shakes his head at them, and then he and Sophia look at each other, shrug their shoulders, and start stripping the beds. Charlus wants to watch some more of The Shape of Water, but the men are examining the tippy marble tiles in the family room den, and my room is too messy to watch a movie in, and Tommy and Sophia are in my parents' room, so that just leaves the living room. And there's no TV in there. And who wants to watch a movie on a computer if you don't have to? So we give up on that activity and use the living room as a performance space to practice our parts for the production of Twelfth Night, which our English class is putting on for the end of the year parents' visitation of the children in their glory day at our private school. Charlus and I are both disappointed in our parts. I'm playing Sir Toby Belch when I wanted to play that depressed Count Orsino guy. And Charlus is playing Sir Andrew Aguecheek, which he's very bummed out about because he wanted to play a girl. Viola, of course, because she's the hero, or Olivia, because she's pretty, or even that smartass maid girl, because she's sexy and fun. But Ms. Victory said he couldn't. even after he pointed out that either part would do for him because Olivia and Viola were almost anagrams of each other, which I thought was a pretty brilliant observation. I don't see why, Charlus says to me. I mean, all the women's parts were played by boys in Shakespeare, and since I identify more as a girl, I'm perfect. I don't know what to do with this line of argumentation, as they say on the PBS NewsHour. I say, let's just figure out how to make Sir Toby and Sir Andrew as funny as possible so we steal the show. Good plan, says Charlus, and we start working on his entrance. Sir Andrew, Sir Toby Belch, how now, Sir Toby? Sir Toby Belch, sweet Sir Andrew. We think we should do a big bromance kind of hug thing, but just as we are going to swoop and hug and pound each other on the back, Mr. Pasternak's Russian guys and the other guys, speaking a different foreign language, run right in between us and out the front door and leave the door open and the flies come in. Then, just as we have shut the door and are getting ready to try again, they come back in with a bunch of machinery while Mr. Pasternak informs me that he will go out and look under house. After the machinery goes through the living room, Mr. P comes back through and is talking on the phone very loudly in what I presume is Hebrew because he keeps on saying Ken, Ken all the time, which I explained to Charlus is not a person named Ken, but rather yes. Next, we hear a loud drilling sound, so I give up on trying to learn lines such as some are born great, some achieve greatness, and some something. Then, unfortunately, a helicopter starts flying overhead very low, and Charlus freaks out and goes and hides under our very nice design within reach chaise lounge because his family on his father's side is from Haiti, and he says his dad still worries that the Tonton Macoute people might come after him. His mother is from Missouri and is very blonde and white. So Charlus is kind of like the former president, I tell him. It's very cool to be biracial, I say. Spoken like a white person, he says, from under his place in the chaise lounge. We try to wait out the drilling. But what I said about the plan going to hell is doubly true when we see what's happening in the erstwhile family room, as they say on KCRW, when that man with the nasal voice starts talking about important books in the afternoon. Wow, says Charlus, c'est vraiment le bordel. Mr. Pasternak and his associates have torn up the den room floor and put yellow police tape around it, and they've started building things called cripple walls, even though the pipe problem has not been fixed yet, and the water in the tub that Charlus saw, it seems like years ago now, is still sort of gurgling there, even as Mr. Pasternak is telling me the following. I get Guy to come with camera, and he'd take pictures of sewer line piping back. We pull up backyard too, probably. Well, that's when I decide I've got to get out of here. This is also when my childhood dream of becoming a plumber gets reborn. My mom's grandfather was a plumber, and he designed the plumbing system for Nordstrom. I heard that story when I was 4, and I promptly started playing a pretend plumber game that I made up, where I talked to an evil fairy who had clogged the drains and got rid of her by flushing 7 times and singing happy birthday. I survey the damage, and I conclude that if I could learn how to fix things, despite the fact that dyspraxia makes it hard for me to learn things just by watching, I wouldn't need any of these adults speaking foreign languages. I could fix the pipes, and Charlus and me could get back to practicing and watching our movies. We retreat to the bedroom. Charlus is sympathetic to my situation, but the noise gets to him. I'm going home, he says. I'll call my housekeeper to come get me. Hey, I say, let's go to my grandpa's condo. Okay, says Charlus, and he gets to work practicing walking in his new slingbacks while I rustle up the change for the Wilshire bus. I feel quite transformed in these shoes, he says to me. I put the change in my pocket and study him. He does look a bit different. Taller, of course, but also a bit more slender, delicate. Can you call me something else, he says. Charlene, I say. No, he says. Jackie, he does a very good twirl and stops close to me. And you are my father because you made me into someone else by giving me your shoes. Okay, my son, let's call Grandpa. Child, Charlus now Jackie says, and you need to use different pronouns. I call my grandfather and tell him we're coming over. So we're set to go, and then the doorbell rings again. I answer because I fear it's another foreign language person or maybe the FedEx delivery person with my How Everything Works encyclopedia. But it's not. It's Grandma standing there in her Zumba exercise clothes, and man, is she pissed off. So that's a little bit of the beginning of Pretend Plumber, and Grandma is very important, as you will find out. And so Ruthie, this is wild. We both have these powerful female protagonists, but also we've got female narrators. And so I was wondering, can you say a little bit about your decision to use Maya, not just as the protagonist, but as the narrator?
Female protagonist and narrator. Yeah, I think I mentioned this a little bit ago, but that as I was editing my book, I came across the word silence or be quiet or shut up or let's keep this secret. So all of her life, Maya had been silenced. And so I thought the best way to tell this story would be through her voice. That's just the natural way to go and give her the opportunity to speak her truth. So, you know, because people mostly want someone silent when they do speak the truth. So of course it made sense that I would also make her an attorney. But there's a scene in the book a little bit later where she's in the field. This is an agave field. I didn't really set up my story very well, but buy the book and it'll be better. Or you can figure it out. Please, no. Scene in the book later where she's speaking to her ancestors. Of course, this is Mexican magic realism. She just says, so an old woman, her grandmother comes to her and says, "Speak your gut, Maya." The old woman said, "Live your mouth so that we no longer are women who are silent, just surviving until we collapse. But remember that we all want forgiveness. Maya, forgive us and let go, be happy." So yeah, I can go on, but you take it away.
Well, I'm going to jump in because I love that you brought up the question of speaking your truth and the question of forgiveness. Because I think that those are both points that our books, as different as they are, really have in common.
Yeah.
Saracine doesn't have problems speaking, as you could see. She really doesn't. She talks and talks and talks and talks in this kind of stream of consciousness way, but she has difficulties being understood, and she absolutely has difficulties being heard. She talks, but her parents and her grandparents don't listen, and that actually literally happens in the beginning of the book. But I love what you said about and your quote about forgiveness, because as I've been rereading your book and thinking about mine, I do really feel that they're both about a kind of journey to forgiveness.
Right.
And that's dealing with these also in the wake of dealing with all of these role models, many of them female, but also male, who are kind of imperfect. Is that a fair characterization of Maya's journey, do you think?
Right. It's learning to accept that everybody's different, and that's even bigger. The diversity is, I mean, that comes into play later, but we're all on this journey, on this road to just getting along. And if we can forgive each other, because nobody is perfect, you know.
Right.
And the other thing, her character grew up thinking that she needed to be perfect. I mean,
absolutely,
there's no such thing. There's no thing. So
right.
Yeah.
Oh, I think that that's a great point. And we certainly, in the course of your book, and I think also in the course of mine, encounter all of these different mother-daughter relationships that are flawed, but at the same time very passionate and very intense. I'm feeling like you brought up the appearance of the grandmother and this kind of magical realism moment, and I'm feeling like maybe we should glide into a little bit of a discussion about that before we read our next little selections. And one of the things that again really struck me about thinking about both our books is the ways in which both of our protagonists, I wouldn't say that they don't have superpowers in that sort of Marvel universe sort of way, but they have a kind of a sensitivity and an openness to other realms, to the magical realm. And I was wondering, just if you could say very quickly before you read the section you want to read, what interested you about using magical realism in this book for these characters?
Well, for me, it's a natural way of writing. It's a way of using my voice. And what, I'm sorry, repeat the question. I'm so sorry. I looked down at my notes.
Right. What appealed to you about using magical realism in your book and for these characters?
Magic realism is a way to it's set in reality, and you can bring in the magic and tell a story. And I said that may or may not be real. It's magical. It's kind of like, this really happened. No, it didn't happen. Yes, it happened. It's a way to tell something painful and make it more palatable. And that's why I chose to tell this story, because there's some very painful things that happen to Mama, and there's just, people don't want to hear the truth. They don't want to hear the truth. So if you dress it up a little bit, maybe that's more exciting for them. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And that actually isn't something we've talked about before, because we have talked about this magical realism privately.
Not in my notes.
About this piece, which is that magical realism allows the reader a little bit of distance from kind of intense emotional moments. It's a little bit, it's not exactly real, so I can kind of, it's okay. It's not quite so scary or quite so sad or quite so I think that's really true, and it's absolutely the case for my book also. But let's hear a little of the magic part from your book, Ruthie.
Okay, so this is let me see. Maybe she's just arrived. I said before that she was never going to go back. No way, I'm not going back. I'm not. So she went back. She's got to claim her father's body. So she visits where she came from. So standing at the border, breathing in the field, I suddenly missed this place, like I'd missed a favorite cousin. And then when a small dove landed on the tip of an agave, I stepped a little closer, but the bird took off deeper into the field. Dwarfed by agave on either side, I chased the dove, remembering how I would run through here as a child with my cousin, Gabriel. When I came to a slight peak in the meadow, hands on my knees, I lifted my head, gulping in more air. The sound of children squealing pierced the wind, but when I looked all around, I was alone. As I took in the view across to the north, like a valley of death, eyes go wide, goosebumps erupting on my arms. What used to be rows of thriving agave were now just shriveled plants in dirt, choked by weeds. Beyond the edge of the field, scrubby mesquites and ancient oak trees dotted the landscape. First, I could see a dried up riverbed where a couple of emaciated looking cows grazed. I rubbed my arms and then reached into my pocket to pull out the picture from Papa's wallet. I held it out in front of me. The river used to be full. I twinge in my stomach, steeling myself for the pain to follow, but incredibly nothing ached. Stretched before me was the exact panoramic view where my father had taken my picture as a girl. I could almost see myself running toward the camera, as churros caked in red cinnamon powder, twin braids flying in the wind. Papa, I whispered now, and then cleared my throat as I continued to wander back through the rows of agave. The ancient sky above this part of the field seemed to sparkle with more sapphire and bluer than any sky I'd ever seen in Los Angeles. The dew on the tips of agave glistened like liquid sugar drops. The heart of the field pulsed with life. Insects appeared larger, butterflies more vibrant, bees buzzed boisterously. The field was sweet and incandescent. like a child's birthday cake topped with a generous arrangement of candles. An orchestra of sound vibrated through me, infusing me with a warmth, penetrating my being, dulling my pain like a tequila. I twirled slowly, so enthralled by my surroundings. Another dove joined the first one, and I followed them both deeper into the field until, out of nowhere, I came upon a man seated in front of a short canvas. I stopped in my tracks, taking a moment to watch him paint. With his back to me, I strained to peek over his shoulder. He sat barefoot and cross-legged, and I could see that he had a reedy frame draped with a loose, gauzy linen tunic and drawstring pants. His head full of obsidian-colored hair gleamed halo-like in the sun. Staring at the canvas, I sucked in a quiet breath when I noticed no brush gliding across the painting, no hands involved in the creation bleeding onto the work. Shaking my head, I squeezed my eyes shut, but quickly reopened them. And then before I could try to make sense of what had just unfolded before my very eyes, and as if sensing my presence without turning around, the man said, "Come closer, Maya." Mind scrambled now like a kaleidoscope of vividly colored emotions. I stammered, I'm so sorry. I just, hey, how did you know that it was me? The young man remained seated, turning his head slowly, seemingly ageless, genderless. He beamed as radiantly as Buddha himself. And as he tilted his head back to look up at me, I peered at him, mesmerized, almost able to soul. I saw the field weaving through his blue-green eyes, and at once I could see myself as a child running through that field, hand in hand with my cousin, giggling the sound of raindrops. Ay Dios, Gabriel, grown up, I said, quickly distracted by the laughter of a child. I looked all around and then turned back toward him. Do you still paint? My cousin asked me in a voice so delicate I feared he might crack if I answered too loudly. I heard again and cocked my head slightly. Not anymore. I've lost the touch, but don't you hear that? Yes, I hear her. He paused and returned to his work. It's all in the brushes. I walked over and picked up one of the brushes, examined it, and then put it to my ear. The touch, the strokes, Gabriel said, quietly dabbing on some paint from his palette, this time using a brush. As I looked closer, I kept seeing things like a hidden picture quality where you see something and you look again, and then you don't see it. There was an underpainting and giving it a glowing backlit feeling. He'd layered so much paint, very thin, like washes, so fine and translucent that I could see the layer underneath. I noticed the intricacies of the agave plant he painted, small insects crawling across the points, floating lazily across the sky. And then as the clouds overhead drifted by, the painting took on a different look in the different light. In one moment, the dominant color glowed a teal green, luminous as if being lit from behind. And then in the next moment, the red tone before, glowing garnet. Peering closer at the agave plant, I gasped. In the gathering dew, I saw a distorted reflection of my own face and held my breath. This painting was alive. Oh my God, is this magic feels like in Field of Dreams or something? This is a field of reality, he answered matter-of-factly. I opened my mouth to ask another question, but the sound of a braying burro sidetracked me. You heard that, right? I asked, craning my head. Of course, Gabriel responded, never lifting his head. Chuy and Don Pio.
I just love that section of your book. I have a couple of favorites, but it's definitely one of my favorites because I feel like I'm looking at a bunch of different, or actually at a bunch of different paintings, or rather one painting that keeps on kind of morphing. Mm-hmm. And I think I'm seeing one thing, and then I'm seeing the Valley of Death, and then I'm seeing something else, and then I'm seeing the painting, and then I'm seeing brushes, then I'm not seeing brushes. It's just really fabulous. I just love it. So that's one incredibly powerful way to use magical realism in your writing. And mine is very different. And we'll talk a little bit after on the other side about our favorite authors. And I think the reason for our different styles will become a little bit clearer. I'm realizing that if we're going to pretend run away from my grandfather's condo using mass transit, I had better plan ahead and make more than my usual supply of sandwiches. I take out more cheese, cream cheese, peanut butter, and jelly. Oh, we need water because Southern California. I take out some bottled water and then I think, possible emergency. So I run back into my bedroom and get a flashlight. Then I remember I need to get my traveler's checks that my mom gave me when we went to Big Sur by ourselves last year. She said, you always need money. And I should get my school ID because you need identification. I go back into the kitchen while Jackie practices their part for Sir Andrew. But guess what? Making sandwiches is a lot of work, and a lot of work is boring. And as you can imagine, it's hard for me to concentrate on things for a long time. So I leave all the sandwiches half made and I go into the hall to take a break and think of something I haven't thought of yet, but that might come to me if I could keep my brain from whirling around. I look down the hall at the front door. Looking into the distance is often refreshing. Perhaps the actual plumber will arrive. I notice Grandma has left her black bag by the front door. It's a big, expensive bag. If the witches in Macbeth were rich, Jewish, and living in Pacific Palisades, they'd have a bag like that. I go over to the front door. Jackie has given up practicing their lines. It's a very small part, and is lounging on the super modern but not very comfortable Italian sofas, but they perk up when they see me looking at the bag. What all is in there? They say. They walk over and grab one of the handles. Don't take anything, I say, but they're already pulling stuff out of it. Handkerchiefs mostly, crumpled up. Why do all grandmothers have these cloth things? They ask rhetorically, waving them around as lint scatters. More stuff comes out, lipsticks, Motrin bottles, receipts, and then a big yellow book with a cartoon of a clueless looking guy holding his hands up. Those graphics look familiar, says Jackie. It looks like a For Dummies book, I say. My mom loves those. It's true. We have a million of them scattered around the house. What language is the title in? Jackie says. It's Hebrew, and underneath is the translation, Practical Kabbalah for Total Schlubs. Jackie grabs the book. Look at the back. Note, contents to be used only as appropriate by a licensed practitioner. Failure to comply may cause extreme reactions. Questions? Call 1818. Product of the Kishef Center in collaboration with the Sauber International Project. What's Kishef? Jackie asks. I take my phone out of my pocket and find out that Kishef means magic. Ah, exclaims Jackie. Enfin, your grand-mère has turned out to be interesting. She's a witch after all. I sigh. I doubt it. If that's the case, why doesn't she just fix the plumbing? Les sorcières, elles ne font pas des choses comme ça. English? Witches don't do things like that, mundane things. They fly and turn you into a statue and they have a cat. I don't think Jews are supposed to do that kind of stuff. Wait, says Jackie, isn't Kabbalah the thing that white rock and roll Vogue lady is into? Mm-hmm. You mean Madonna? Yeah, so what is it, Kabbalah? I Google practical Kabbalah and get a bunch of incredibly long articles, but I share my screen with Jackie and we kind of figure out one. Practical Kabbalah is a kind of Jewish mysticism that deals with the use of magic. 2, apparently certain kinds of magic are okay to practice, but only a special elite of people are allowed to do magic, and even this special elite group is only permitted to do magic under certain circumstances, and we can't figure out what those circumstances are exactly. 3, there are spells having to do with angelic names, using the divine, and using amulets and incantations. 4, then there's this other Kabbalah that's more thinky and involves trying to understand things like the nature of God and the nature of existence through study. Of course, studying is always in Judaism, and meditation. 5, these days, and since most always, this magical type of Kabbalah seems to be frowned upon, as my mom would say, which means it's forbidden-ish, and you're not supposed to do it, but some people still do it anyway, it seems like. Ugh, says Jackie, meditation. So that's how magic gets introduced in my book. And this is making me think of the authors who I have looked to as kind of helpers to help me write magical realism. Who are all magical realist authors that you admire, Ruthie?
Well, it goes back to people like Murakami and Allende, of course, and Laura Esquivel. And you and I both like Guillermo del Toro, which we have that in common. But so the Latin or the Mexican authors would have been, Allende, well, not Allende, but Laura Escobar and Guillermo del Toro and things like that. I mean, I also liked Frida Kahlo, artists, but that whole surrealistic thing that lends itself to magic realism as well.
I totally thought of Frida Kahlo when you were reading your magical realism section this time. I was like, oh, this feels like a Frida Kahlo painting. This feels like series of them. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And of course, the people that I connect with, I'm absolutely a Guillermo del Toro fan, and those movies play a role in the book. But my sort of touchstones are actually Stacy Levine, Amy Bender, and Kathleen Alcala. And it seems to me it's not coincidental that you're really attracted to Mexican and Latin American writers and artists, and I'm really attracted to magical realist writers, all of whom are Jewish. Okay. And Kathleen Alcala is Latina and Opata, I think Opata tribe, and Jewish. So this leads us to this question of heritage, which is actually quite important in both of our books. And I was wondering, Ruthie, if you could say just a little bit more about Maya's relationship to Mexicanness.
Well, sure, she's Mexican, and but also has, and I don't want to say immigrated, because her family would go back and forth. So she's constantly straddling that border. In magic realism, you're constantly straddling reality, or not just reality, but you're not painting within the lines. You're kind of blurring the lines. So, and heritage is really big, even though she was wanting to distance herself from it, but having to go back. I mean, it's come on, you can't run away from that stuff. It's in your veins. Try as you might, as hard as you assimilate. She's brought up in the Catholic Church, which is steeped in all kinds of, I don't want to call it magic realism, so as to not to offend my ancestors, but I mean, what's more magic than transforming whatever they do with the wine into water and things like that. So
yeah, absolutely. I love what you said about borders, because your book is all about, is about physical borders, but is so much about the continual crossing of borders between the real and the unreal.
Right.
And of course, crossing of borders between Mexico and the United States, a border that of course didn't exist because it was all part of Spain. Mm-hmm. And I just love the way your book explores that. My book is exploring borders too in I guess a little bit of a different way, because Saracene's hold on Jewish identity is a little fragile because her mother isn't Jewish. So she has a certain anxiety about being Jewish enough that isn't fully conscious. She's also aware, because of her grandfather, who is a refugee from the Third Reich, of the provisional nature of whiteness. Mm-hmm. And that is a very important idea that will get developed more as the book goes on. And I'm seeing that we're at 7:46 and Cyan is here. And I'm wondering if should we open for questions?
Yeah, we already have 3. So yes. So I guess what we'll do is we'll start out with the one from Juanita, because it's for both of you. So for both of you, as Stephanie, you already pointed out, you have strong female narrators with a distinct voice, although they span different generations. And both of your books have seem to talk about generational differences. How hard is it to capture that generational divide?
Ooh, that's a good question.
How hard is it to capture the divide? You want to go first, Stephanie, or?
I so don't want to go first, but I'll try. I think it was easy-ish for me because I'm writing purely in first. It's kind of first person limited, so I'm very much in the head of my not quite 14-year-old protagonists, and 14-year-olds, or at least this former 14-year-old, really just didn't know what to do with her parents. And so I kind of took that experience and thrust it on Saracine. She really doesn't, and she says this at the beginning of the book, she says, I love mom and dad, but I don't like them very much. So there's already just, it's just a big divide. I'm not sure it's age so much as they're not paying attention to me. They don't hear me. Coming back to the question of silence, which we talked about, silence and not being heard. So that's kind of how that worked. What about you, Ruthie? You had a lot of work to do, working with several different generations.
Yeah, and again, it's first person, and just one point of view. So, well, that's what that is. But I happen to be a mother, a daughter, a grandmother. So I've, used a lot of my own experiences, as I said at the beginning about speaking my truth, a lot of it is my truth. Therefore, I dumped in that magic realism. So some of Lily's truth is my truth, or I kind of mixed it up, but that's how I was able to capture their voices, or to speak from their point of view a little bit.
Next question.
Thank you for that. So the next question, I'll do the one that is for Ruthie. So in Hindu mythology, Maya is illusion. Is that part of what we should know and understand about Maya in your book, Agave Blues?
I'd like to adopt that and use it going forward, but no, Maya, they're the Mayans and the Aztecs in Mexico, and probably a lot more cultures down there. So I chose Maya. I always liked the name Maya. But I'm going to use that a Hindu thing for the next book.
Yeah. So this one is for Stephanie. I'm interested in Shakespeare's participation in Pretend Plumber. Yes, the class play, and then Macbeth's witches. Why is he here?
As I've shared with friends, one of the great things about writing fiction is you can take all of your obsessions and things that fascinate you, and you can put them on your characters. And I'm a big Shakespeare fan. I read Tales from Shakespeare when I was a kid. Shakespeare in the Park in New York City. I'm from New York originally. Shakespeare in the Park started when I was 9, and they were putting on Antony and Cleopatra, and I really wanted to go to the park, and my parents just were not going to have any of that. They were not going to take me to Central Park to some wacky public performance. No. But my grandparents, my very crazy bohemian fun grandparents, said, sure, let's go. And so they attempted to take me to the play. We didn't succeed, but because it was already sold out, so they'd given all the tickets away. But I kind of retained this fascination for Shakespeare. And I also, I played Sir Toby Belch in middle school in 12th Night. And it was really, really fun. And it was really, really fun to play a man. And I am not sure I had played a man before, but the idea of playing a different gender and of allowing that experience to open up a more fluid sense of gender identity is an important idea in this novel. Saracen, as you can see, Jackie is already on their road to kind of a trans journey. And Saracen also embarks on a kind of questioning identity, not just of orientation, but of gender presentation. And the theater was, that theatrical piece was a wonderful way to introduce that. The Macbeth piece was really kind of just for fun. Back to the idea of magical realism, creating a little distance. I didn't want the grandmother to seem too scary. And so one way to kind of say, oh, well, she's maybe a little witchy, she's maybe a little scary, was to kind of use Macbeth to make a joke about it. You know, Jewish witches in Macbeth with very expensive handbags going, what, this fire is terrible, Macbeth, what are you doing? Actually, it would be a funny play. But that was kind of a fun way to kind of soften that character. And I feel like there was another piece to that question, and I don't think I quite got what that was.
Sorry, let me pull it back up. Something about the class. Oh wait, you already talked about the class play.
Oh, okay, good. Then I think I answered.
Yeah. I think that's everything for the audience questions. If people want to type them out, I'll ask my question in the meantime. So I guess for both of you, I'm a librarian, so I have to ask this question to writers because I think it's so fun. So if you did do research for this book, which I'm assuming you did, even if it was just like, I never know, like with authors doing research, it could be like the most off the wall things. So was there anything that like stood out during your research process that you just didn't expect to see, or you didn't expect to have to search for your books?
That's a really, really interesting question. Ruthie, would you like to go first?
Sure. So some I didn't expect. So my research involved me taking many trips down to my home, the roots of my, which is in Jalisco, Mexico. I call the town Sagrada Familia, which is Holy Family, the name of the church there. But I didn't expect to learn as much as I did about my family. I learned from agave. We really come from agave. I mean, in the end, I thought maybe I didn't inherit a tequila farm, they actually had summoned me down there because they wanted me to take over out with the business, but it wasn't going to work out. So I at least got to come away with a story. But I'd gone down there to just reconnect, and because my two daughters were both living in Mexico. One was a journalist and the other one was studying in Cholula, Mexico City. So I had to go. I had to get a story. I didn't know what it was going to be necessarily, but I'm happy with how it turned out.
Yeah, that's such a great answer, Ruthie, and thank you for tackling that. That gave me time to think. I think that what really surprised me and continues to surprise me is the incredible, we were talking about this a little bit before we started actually, Cyan and Ruthie and me, the incredible complexity of Judaism, and not just Jewish traditions. Like Saracen, I looked up a lot of stuff on Wikipedia, and the Wikipedia articles on Judaism were insanely long, had pictures, had footnotes. It's just wild how much is there, because every piece of knowledge is kind of commentated upon, and then there's arguments about all of it. And I had a recent experience with this just this weekend in LA. I saw two young Orthodox Jews, a boy and a girl, teenagers, on scooters. And I texted my husband and I said, can you ride a scooter on Shabbat if you're Orthodox? And of course, he promptly, being a nice Jewish boy, he went online, and it's articles, arguments, responsa. He brought it up to our wonderful rabbi. He was, Shavuot just got celebrated over the weekend, and she had all, so just this one little question And as an egghead, I just love that just kind of endless discussion. So it's a source of great joy and continual discovery for me.
Thank you so much. Those were great answers. Um, I guess we don't. I guess we'll wrap up the question part, but I'll ask just like as an ending statement for each of you. When someone reads your novel, like what is maybe something like an emotion, a feeling, or just kind of like what do you want them to take away from it?
Yeah, I'll go first with that one because it's really, really simple. I want people to be glad they showed up. That I really want people to read Pretend Plumber and go, gosh, I'm so glad I came. I'm glad I took this ride. What about you, Ruthie?
Well, I like that. I too would want them to come on a ride and, just suspend your imagination. Is that the right term? Suspend your belief system, I guess, and come along for this ride. I had a bad comment on Goodreads or something when somebody, they gave me a 1 star because they said it was just totally unbelievable. Well, hello, it's magic realism, so come read the book, discover a lot about the country, discover a lot about the similarities and the differences, I guess, but discover this rich, wonderful country that's just, right. There are neighbors, there are brothers and sisters. So
Right.
we are more alike than we are different. And so.
Your book really gets that job done. It makes me want to go to Mexico like instantly.
Oh, to the tequila country?
Well, that too, of course.
Yeah. So.
Well, I think that brings us to the end of our session. Cyan, thank you so much. Thank you so much, wonderful Ruthie. Love your book. Thank you so much, lovely audience. We'll see you soon.
Thank
Bye,
you. Good night, everybody. I'll have the recording up on the Chevalier's YouTube. If you know somebody who wasn't able to make it, it'll be up there probably like tomorrow evening.
All
Awesome.
right.
Thank y'all so much.
Thank you.
Good night.